I'm going to welcome the keynote speaker, Ann Miller. She's the director of the Colorado Resiliency Office within the Department of Local Affairs. They support local governments to build stronger, safer, and more resilient communities. She has a master's of urban planning and policy as a member of the American Institute of Certified Planners and has over 25 years of community development experience across the public and private sectors. Ann serves on the Colorado Wildfire Resiliency Code and Colorado Natural Disaster Mitigation Enterprise Boards. Did I get that? I think I got it. So yeah, well, let's welcome Ann. She's got a great presentation for us this morning. Thanks, Ann.
Good morning. Yes, I'm Ann Miller. I'm the director of the Colorado Resiliency Office. We're in state government in the Department of Local Affairs, and I'm honored to be here today to help kick off this amazing conference. It's my first time here, so I'm really proud to work and live in Colorado. We have a real commitment to building a culture of resilience, which is evident in what we've heard so far. And I'm excited to be in a room of movers and shakers doing resilience work across the state. So thank you for being here and your dedication and work. And we look forward to the learning ahead and the lessons learned that you all can share. So we face some challenges ahead. This month, an opinion poll of frequent voters by the Colorado Polling Institute showed that more than 80% were concerned about political divisions in the country, low Colorado snowfall this winter, and the risk of wildfire in Colorado. That's why we're here. These challenges are interconnected. Drought intensifies wildfire risk, and divisions can weaken our ability to address challenges. And these pressing challenges call for creative approaches and partnerships for greater impact. And this work is happening across Colorado, which you'll hear about during the fireside chat after a few opening words that I'm giving. And throughout the conference, we'll be exchanging those lessons learned. There's a lot of uncertainty ahead, but one thing is certain, is we need to be prepared now with strong relationships and take action and build those resilient, adaptive systems that can adapt no matter what comes our way. Right. So I'll give a quick overview. I'm going to root us in resilience by giving an overview of resilience work at the state level and some implications for our work with communities and the work that you're doing. And then most importantly, I'll bring up 3 resilience local leaders to discuss and have them share their lessons learned. So they'll come up shortly. So we have Josh Haynes, the Routt County Wildfire Mitigation Council Executive Director and also a board member of PACO. Lisa Ritchie, the Town of Lyons Planning and Building Director, and Kohl Parrot, the Larimer County Deputy Emergency Manager. So they'll be coming up to join us shortly. So given the Rooted in Resilience theme of the conference, let's start by looking at the definition of resilience. A lot of people say, oh, resilience means different things for different people. True, but did you know that we actually have a state definition in our statutes? This was created with the bill that created the Resiliency Office in 2018. And I'm gonna read it because it really is a lot, but it encompasses the systems thinking that we're going to be talking about. So resilience is the ability of communities to rebound, positively adapt, or thrive amidst changing conditions or challenges. That could be human caused or in natural disasters. And to maintain a quality of life, healthy growth, durable systems, economic vitality, and conservation of resources for present and future generations. So you've got a lot of points here, and I'll emphasize the durable systems and the future generations. We heard from the commissioner about long-term thinking, about building communities that work together. So this is embodied in this definition. Our office was established, as I mentioned, in statute formally in 2018, but grew out of the shock event of cascading wildfires and then the big floods, so 2012 and 2013. And the office was created in the governor's office initially and then moved over to the Department of Local Affairs 2017. And we're a permanent office. Our mission is to really be that interface with state agencies so we can better serve communities to build stronger, safer, and more resilient systems, and to be able to adapt and thrive into the future. We do that by our Resilient Colorado Communities program, and some of you may have been engaged in some of our work. We do webinars and have all kinds of toolkits and best practices, and we bring people together to solve problems. So because we have kind of a camp theme going on up here, I'll highlight a couple. One is Camp Resilience. It's a day training program that we do with teams of local governments and their partners, where they learn about resilience principles and then they apply them to a priority project. So they put it into action. We also do a number of peer exchanges. We've talked a lot about, we have a lot of knowledge in this room, and we've done peer exchanges around COVID recovery, wildfire recovery, and now Marguerite Harden, are you in the room here? Back here? Yes, she is facilitating, along with the Division of Fire Prevention and Control, a peer exchange on implementation of the new Wildfire Resiliency Code. So go to their session at 1:30 today if you want to learn more. So those are just a couple examples. In addition, I wanted to shine a light on a couple of our toolkits. So these are kind of do-it-yourself, step-by-step guides for building resilient systems and walking your community through a process to get there with our community readiness and resilience toolkit. And then we have a post-disaster toolkit as well. Another great toolkit that's been around and was developed after the floods, based on the lessons learned, is be thoughtful about how your communities develop and grow. We had a lot of lost properties and some lost life as a result of disasters in Colorado. So where you build matters, how you build matters. So this is a tool that planners and local governments can use to make good decisions about where risks are, where they should have development, and if they do have development in high-risk areas, how to mitigate those risks. And I think the Wildfire Resiliency Code is one of those examples. And we have so much other guidance, and Marguerite can tell you more about that as our local resiliency manager, so you can catch her as well as I'm happy to talk to you more. So that's kind of our community work. Let's step back and look about how the state is working across agencies to create a framework for collective action and how to better support local governments and communities. So did you know that in 2015, the Colorado Resiliency Framework was a first of its kind in the nation? And actually, Colorado was out in front as one of the first states to have a resiliency office. There are now 12 plus resiliency offices in states across the nation. We are on a 5-year schedule to update our framework, and each 5 years there's new challenges, new disruptions. So the 2015 framework was informed a lot by the wildfires and floods that I mentioned. 2020, we were in the midst of a global pandemic. our 3 largest wildfires in Colorado's history and racial justice protests. And in 2025, we just are completing the resiliency framework. We'll be releasing it probably next week. So we're excited about that, and new disruptions and changing in the federal landscape, and our worst snowpack in history, highest temperatures, etc. So really intense wildfire conditions. So a lot is happening. We are taking action. We're taking this seriously across state agencies, as you can see, through a multitude of different types of plans, from the Colorado Water Plan to CDOT's Resilient Improvement Program. So every agency is taking this work seriously. They're drilling down into, like, what does this mean for our agency? What do we need to do differently? How do we support this work in communities? And we do this by coordinating across agencies with our Colorado Resiliency Working Group. So before the 2020 framework, we did a survey of local governments around resilience planning, and then 5 years later, we did one, and this is the results. What we're seeing is that local governments and communities are embedding resilience thinking into their work, that this is becoming more of that culture that we talked about. I may not call it that, but this is happening because people are taking the work seriously. So 72% of local governments say, hey, yes, we have the political will to do this work. 91% of the survey respondents are talking about resilience planning in somewhat degree. And then the final one is just wildfire and housing, economic stressors are in the top level concerns. So we do know that people care about this in our work. So what are we doing about it? The resiliency framework lays the roadmap out for us, sets some goals, some strategies and actions to move forward. And I really like this graphic because it is a holistic representation of using that resilience lens. Everything's connected. So we look at 6 resiliency sectors around the middle, from community to economic to housing to watershed and natural resources, etc. And then we look at risk and opportunities and what can we do to take action together to make a difference. We have identified 5 issue priority areas that are, again, multi-sector, and we're working across agencies to implement those strategies and actions around mitigating hazards, economic resilience, critical infrastructure, strategic growth, as I mentioned earlier, how we grow matters, and then resilient and affordable housing. These are all important components for a resilient community. We also have overarching strategies that really go back to the state needs to practice what it preaches. And we are working with our quarterly Colorado Resiliency Office, our Colorado Resiliency Working Groups, the interagency group, on advancing how can we do this work better. We're looking at integrating resilience into state agencies and our programs and investments. We're looking at attracting and leveraging resilience funding and improving and aligning resources so we can be more effective. And then we're also using a tool that was laid out in the 2015 resiliency framework, and that is these 9 resilience prioritization criteria. These can be used for you to think about a project or a plan. So how is a particular project looking at multiple benefits, co-benefits? How are we bringing in that innovation that was mentioned earlier? Adaptive capacity, thinking about the long term. Remember the definition, we're looking at future generations. So how does this project really have that long lasting, and how does it have impact? These play out in all kinds of examples of the work that you're doing. Nature-based solutions, and maybe it's a watershed project or wetland preservation, where you're looking at not only ecosystem services, you're looking at recreation access perhaps, and the return on investment and economic benefits of this work. So there's and the list goes on and on. I'm gonna leave you with just a quick summation of a few points where this work is happening, and our office has helped fund some projects out in communities, and Marguerite and her team manage a microgrid for community resilience program, and they are funding resilience hubs, one right here in Fort Collins at a recreation center, where we helped fund a project that brings in backup power, microgrids. It has, the overall project has more tree planting to reduce urban heat island and extreme heat impacts. It has all kinds of great benefits for communities to gather and have backup power supply in the event of a disruption. We're also funding a microgrid up in Estes Park, working with partners in the utility there. It's a district-wide microgrid that provides backup power to critical facilities, including the hospital and the fire department. There's so many other ways to integrate resilience into your plans, from hazard mitigation plans to comprehensive plans to pre-disaster recovery plans. So that's just a little bit to get the seed planted. Now I want to call up our panelists for the fireside chat. And while they're coming up, I wanted to ask you, did you know that one of the most resilient and adaptive species is the common dad joke, which manages to survive even the most harshest conditions? We're gonna test this out today. All right, so we're gonna break down this fireside chat into 3 sections. The first is what are actions you can take before a disruption or disaster, during, the second, and then the final after, okay? So the first question, we'll have Josh start first, is, so we know that for every $1 spent on mitigation, we save $6+ in recovery. So, panelists, from your unique perspective, how do you turn that math into motivation in your community?
Thanks, Ann, for having me. I'm here representing all the little nonprofit collaboratives with limited capacity. We're a pretty young organization. We've been staffed for just about 3.5 years now with a staff of 2, and every once in a while we'll bring on a seasonal or 2 to sort of help support us. So for us, our biggest challenge is just funding and the capacity to go out and talk to a county that consists of about 25,000 people and a considerable influx of visitors and tourists in the summer months and winter months. So for us, what we've had the most success with is, and by far our favorite and best program, is a neighborhood wildfire ambassador program. So these are community volunteers that we train up in partnership with Fire Adapted Colorado. They run a great program. If anyone's considering an ambassador program in this room, please reach out to Lara or Becca or any of the incredible team at Fire Adapted Colorado. But we've got about 30 plus or minus ambassadors trained right now. They all represent 40 to 50 homes in their communities. Again, incredible volunteers, and the best path to reaching a bunch of people that we otherwise wouldn't have that intimate access to. So the problems that it solves, again, is like we don't have the financial capacity to have a bunch of staff running around and knocking on doors. So these volunteers do that work on their own accord. We provide them with support, but that additional capacity, again, really enables us to reach an audience that we wouldn't otherwise have access to. it's instant connections with a wider audience. They promote our other programs and participation in those, so it really raises awareness, not just for our organization, but for the value that we can bring into those communities. Ultimately, a lot of those communities become fire-wise because you've really raised that level of engagement and get them organized and working toward longer-term goals. And then ultimately, we're meeting the neighbors of those communities, so they get to a place where they've done the work in their neighborhoods, and then they want to talk to surrounding HOAs and other communities and bring them along for that ride. So.
Great. Well, why don't you?
All right. Well, thank you. I think so. The 1 to 6 ratio is I'll start there, and that's just a super important ratio for especially justifying budgets, justifying grant applications, kind of using it for that. But ultimately, it's the kind of the shared experience of our community that is the why for why we're actually doing the work. So I think what we try to do, especially, is frame it in that way. And in that way, we're trying to, tell folks and talk to them about this. This work isn't about saving money necessarily. This is about protecting, the place that you took your kids fishing. It's about the places that you grew up camping. It's about the places that you live, that your friends and family live, that you recreate, that you see every morning on your commute. All those are the kind of things that we ultimately use for kind of that why. And ultimately, we're going to continue to kind of promote that idea through this kind of just storytelling. So ultimately, we in Larimer County we've had a number of fires. So we have this proximity, at least time-wise, to disaster and fire. And so we have this kind of natural buy-in right now that we can look back on and see these fires. But otherwise, we want to continue to, again, share stories. To share stories about, of course, what was lost, during where mitigation would have helped, but also, to places that this would have, where mitigation succeeded. So we can lean into our own examples here in Larimer County where we do that, but also look into our partners, so in our regional experience as well. So we look to our just kind of our other counties around the state. Look to other areas, so other counties around the state, but also regionally. So look to how others around the region and the country are responding, sharing those stories with our community about especially success stories where mitigation worked. But ultimately, we're trying to kind of promote this idea that if fire is a kind of a part of the state in which we live, which it is, and not just state, but the whole region, then mitigation should be part of that as well, right? This shouldn't just be a one-time response to an event. This is a thing that we do all the time because fire is something that we're going to live with. It's something that's permanent.
Implementation of the Wildfire Code. Hi everybody, my name is Lisa. I am not a wildfire professional. I am a local government planner. And so impacts of wildfire in community was brought forth really dramatically to me personally in my leadership role through Marshall Fire Recovery in Louisville. So I bring a little bit of a different perspective to this conversation. And so my role in this conversation is really kind of what are we doing at the local government level to increase our resiliency, and how can the kind of non-wildfire professionals partner with all of you, which is really encouraging to me to see how many of you are in this room and advancing this conversation. Currently now I'm employed with the Town of Lyons, and so in this space we are actively implementing the newly passed Colorado Wildfire Resiliency Code, which many of in the room are aware of. And so, I think we've seen a pretty dramatic shift in the last 5 years, particularly in our Front Range communities. I think, folks in this room have long known the risk that wildfire brings to our Front Range communities, but I think our public awareness is dramatically increased as we continue to see these wildfires in what is maybe our more non-traditional, historically non-traditional WUI areas. So at the local government level, implementing the Wildfire Resiliency Code, I think has happened primarily through a lot of conversation. And so I really think about the value of conversation with all of our partners as we think about implementing resiliency in our communities. I'm grateful for the work Marguerite's done, so I'm looking forward to hearing more about that. Just getting our local leaders up to speed on how to implement these codes, the importance of implementing these codes, and the strategies. And in Lyons, our community thankfully was very grateful for the framework of a state code, for not having to put in all of that work itself to adopt the code. They happily, I think, and wholeheartedly adopted the code. We've now transitioned as a community into what can we do that advances that conversation? What can we do that folks maybe moves the needle from I'm curious about the code to I'm going to actually undertake mitigation on my property. One of the shifts that we really need to do, as you all know, is change the conversation from what is everybody else going to do to reduce my risk to what am I as an individual going to do to also reduce my risk. And so collective
Okay. Okay, I promised a dad joke. Are you ready for one? It is camping themed. Okay, since we're here around the campfire. Okay, what did the father say to his daughter when her marshmallows kept falling in the fire? Stick with it. Okay, sigh. Yeah, that's a dad joke for you. Okay, good. Now we're going to go on to round 2, which we're really looking at, okay, what is happening during a disruptive event? And how are we thinking about adaptive systems? So the question is, when the smoke in the air is in the air, perfect plans often meet messy realities. How does your agency maintain the flexibility to pivot during a crisis while keeping long-term resilience in mind? Do you want to start? You're holding
Sure.
the mic.
Yeah, and we are in fire restrictions, so if someone can put that out.
I know. I thought about that.
Yeah. So, I'll start. So I'm with Larimer County Office of Emergency Management. So of course, part of our response is going to be activating an emergency operations center. So I'll kind of start with just this point of I think we really want to make sure we are adopting kind of what I kind of maybe consider a recovery starts now mindset, which ultimately means that there's no perfect time, right? We want to make sure that we are focusing on recovery from the very beginning of an incident, that we are focusing on what happens all the way through the not just when the kind of the fire goes out, but what happens after that. So ultimately, we've baked this kind of concept into how we respond to an incident. That way, this move from response to recovery isn't a pivot. It's kind of just a natural way in which we continue to respond to this incident. It moves from large-scale response to recovery. And the way we're doing that is through focusing on consequence management and the cascading impacts of a disaster. So if we're looking at, not just what's happening at the incident, the fire, for this, example, then we're looking at, what might that look like, that fire look like tomorrow or the next week after that, the next month, the next year, right? And if we're doing that, then we're going to think of all those cascading impacts, those things that how the watershed's impacted, how people are impacted, how economic health is impacted, all those kind of things become part of the conversation. And then we start to then activate our partners based on that. And I would say, we activate those partners early so those conversations can start before they absolutely need to. There's not going to be an exact time in which we break from response to recovery. So we want to bring those partners in early so we can start having those conversations. I think I'll also provide just an example on how we responded to Cameron Peak Fire. So Larimer County, back in 2020, we had Cameron Peak Fire, and pretty quickly we're obviously responding within our emergency operations center. But pretty quickly activated what was the Recovery Coordination Committee. So part of that committee, some of you here may have also even been on that committee, was a large number of kind of different work groups. And I just want to I brought our org chart from this incident. just to kind of talk about and just again provide you an example of how this work actually happened. So within our recovery committee, this is again we activated the right partners to have these conversations. Was a water recovery work group, an infrastructure work group, a public and environmental health and debris management work group, a community recovery work group, mitigation and resilience work group, economic health, information management work group, and financial and grant work group. And under all those work groups are a number of different tasks, right? But being able to pull all those folks together at the same time that the EOC is still activated, or that we're responding to the incident, allowed for flexibility and coordination, right? We're able to kind of all work together off the same sheet of music and flex together as things happen with the incident. And ultimately respond well as we moved into true recovery after the flames and the smoke, all that was gone. So ultimately the recovery coordination group is what I wanted to mention is how we really do that. And of course, we're gonna keep doing that same thing during incidents here. But yeah, that's how the, we as Larimer County Emergency Management does it. Focus on recovery early. Don't think of it as a pivot from response to recovery. It's all part of the same kind of continuum. And the earlier you get partners in, the easier that job's going to become.
Music to my ears, thank you.
What's brown and sticky? A stick. Good job, Allie. You're killing it so far this conference. So I'll talk about the role of community networks and the organizations and people that Office of Emergency Management would start to connect with during an incident and where we sort of see ourselves. In Routt County, we finished a community wildfire protection plan in 2023. And then in 2025, the county put together a disaster preparedness and recovery plan that's sort of an all hazards approach. At the same time, we recognized that there was going to be a heavy lean onto some of the community organizations to assist with recovery, and that got lightly tested last summer during the Crow Show fire, and sort of emphasized the importance of that work. Our program manager, Haley Cunningham, raise your hand, Haley, spent a lot of time and hours putting together a recovery playbook, which picks up where the disaster preparedness and recovery plan sort of leaves off. And that playbook contemplates sort of pre and post disaster recommendations of things that can be done, again, in advance of something. You can do this before you are living through a catastrophic event, and then things that you can do after. And we took a lot of inspiration from Lisa and Allison James, who ran recovery after the Marshall Fire, and I had seen them talk at the After the Flames conference and was so moved, and it resonated and really, again, just sort of emphasized the need for us to be doing something up in rural Routt County. So the key takeaway from that playbook and the overarching recommendation was to do this work in advance so that those networks are in place before Office of Emergency Management is stressed out and reaching out and trying to connect people so that we know what our roles are going to be, we know what we're going to be looked at to do. And so we put together a small group that consisted of our local Yampa Valley Community Foundation and our local United Way office, and we formed, is everyone ready for another acronym? COAD, Community Organizations Active in Disaster. We're at the early onset of developing that COAD. We started initial outreach to our sort of tier 1 organizations that'll be leaned on most hard and are named in the RSFs, Response Recovery Support Functions.
There you go.
Thank you. That was a new acronym for me also, so I appreciate you sticking with me on this. But we're not quite fully ready, but we're taking these affirmative steps. So we can be the people that the OEM needs us to be when and if an event happens.
Pretty amazing stuff, huh?
Yeah, and I think for any of you who want to look for good examples of recovery plans, check out Haley and Josh's work. I think they did a fantastic job of bringing planning down to the local level and trying to kind of frame out those recovery networks. So I congratulate them on that really great work. At the local government level, I think some of it's fairly simple. You know, I think it can come down to just even knowing where your data lives and what will happen to that accessing that data in a disaster. Is it stored in the cloud? Is it stored on a local server that if power goes down, you're not going to be able to access? Is it stored in paper files? You know, a lot of organizations still have files and files of paper. And so I think some of it just is just knowing kind of who has the keys to the bus, if you will, and how to access that. I think a lot of it from the local government level, building your relationships with your emergency partners, with the county, with the responders, and knowing your role in a disaster. As we all know, for those of us that have been through one of these events, you can't be everywhere all at once, and you are going to have to understand who is covering which area and be able to make those decisions in real time, hopefully with the best information that you can. In terms of kind of keeping the wheels on the bus, if you will, at the local level, again, I really think a lot of it comes down to having systems in place that are adaptable, and if your data is all on the server, what can you pivot up into the cloud to get? And then really being forward thinking. I think one of the things that we realized pretty quickly in the Marshall Fire was that a lot of our data that we would be developing on day 2 would service on day 30 and then day 300. And so when we built like some of our recovery data collection systems in GIS, we just kind of thought through what are the things that we're going to want to track over time, what are the key recovery points that are, you know, folks are going to want to be paying attention to. So again, I think having a good understanding of who in your system can have skill sets that maybe you haven't had to lean on in kind of your blue sky days, but can adapt and think through how to be strategic over the long term of a recovery is really key. So we found that, you know, GIS data, that data is still getting used, and public now likes to see dashboards, right? When did we start cleaning up lots? That was already embedded in our GIS recovery from the damage assessments. And then when did those building permits start getting pulled? So again, I think is just as you're thinking about what types of data you're going to be capturing, trying to think through how you can use that moving forward, going long term. And then again, I think just really building your relationships. I know that's going to be a theme that we see here, but we all can't be everything all at once, and especially in the moment of a disaster. So kind of knowing who will be at the table, who's going to be showing up, leaning on your partners at the state, I think, and then in turn, the relationships we have with federal government in terms of recovery are really key. So I could go on and on, but I really also want to just highlight the thing that you said, Kohl, about the working groups of all of those kind of 6 or 7 different components, watershed. At least I think having a framework of identification of who those key partners are to help guide those decision making in those immediate days and weeks after, I think seems like a really, really great key.
So Lisa, I remember working with you after the Marshall Fire, and you've had a little experience, I think, after the 2013 floods with disasters, but really you learned a lot, right? So how many of you have been through a disaster, either personally or with your professional life? Okay, so I think it's resonating with folks, and just going back to the opening comments around learning and innovating and getting better. And I do feel like as a state, Colorado, again, is leading in this area, and we are taking the lessons learned and using them. So let's move on to the final round here. And this is kind of the after scenario. So recovery is as evolution. So post-disaster is a challenging time for communities, but also the greatest window of change. How do we ensure we are building back better for 2050 and beyond? Lisa, do you want to start out since you got the mic?
Sure. So we had a lot of conversations about what does rebuilding better look like. And so, you know, we didn't have some of the impacts that you all might face with forest health and watershed health. In Marshall Fire, we were in a suburban area, right? So it really was about, our conversations really centered more around the built environment and what were the homes and the energy efficiency and what type of construction, wildfire resiliency was our community going to accept and adopt, all through either incentives and education and enforcement. And so I really think, looking back, it was a challenging conversation. I think our community, you have hundreds, if not thousands, of residents who are faced with making decisions that they didn't anticipate happening. And I think capacity of knowledge, capacity of labor force, capacity of the economic realities in your community all need to factor in with the desire to rebuild better and stronger. And I think you can do both, but I think you have to be honest with your decision makers, with your public, and try and gather input in terms of, again, what are the right trade-offs to make. And so in Boulder County, where the Marshall Fire struck, I think we already had a high degree of a value system that valued energy efficiency, but I think folks really bristled when they were told they had to. And so what we tried to do was pair that with incentives and choice. And so I think to some degree, the vast majority of folks adopted a high degree of energy efficiency, but I do think it came at some of a social cost and fracturing of trust in the community as those decisions were being made along the way. So I think it's really challenging to navigate how to rebuild when folks are actively recovering and responding with trauma, and they're making their own decisions. So, ultimately, I think you can rebuild back better. I do think it should be a high priority, but just understand, I think those conversations are really challenging, and I think you need to have a good awareness of where your community is, the labor forces, the cost impacts, and all of those in those decisions.
And I think it's also testimony for the benefit of being proactive and doing that in blue sky days instead of in a kind of post-disaster setting where it's really difficult to have those conversations.
So for Larimer County OEM, I'll talk about, I think one of the main things we do is making sure that we kind of make the disaster work for us a little bit. And what I kind of mean by that is taking the opportunity that disasters can provide to do the things that we need to do. So that sometimes does look like the implementation of new codes, applying for grants, those types of things, but also additions of different programs. So we've in Larimer County always taken a lot from disasters. So in 2020 in Cameron Peak Fire we had an OEM staff of 3. Now we're up to 7. So and the reason we is because it's a good time to ask for new staff every time we have a disaster. So we do that, but also it's a good time to make changes as necessary too. So again, mention codes and things like that. But since then, we've developed a lot in our program. We have a mitigation program within our office now, which is something we didn't necessarily have at that time. So ultimately, I think we want to make that disaster work for us. But then also, continue to what I kind of consider just managing like the right room. So as during disaster, I mentioned all those groups that we have, partners we've invited in, but that shouldn't go away after the recovery starts to calm down. We're kind of looking further out. We're getting years and years away from the incident. We want to make sure that we're still engaging with those partners, that we're continually analyzing our region and our community to invite the right partners in and make sure we're speaking with those folks and working together. So just managing the right room there. And then additionally is just kind of continually using kind of narrative to speak with our community. So we're using, similarly how I talked about in preparedness, just stories. So we're talking about the stories, of course, from our own disasters that we may have, and our neighbors, talking about success stories, and also just our regional partners, but making sure that we know that we're communicating to them, of course, that that for every dollar we spend, right, we're saving 6 or more, but also talking to them that this work is ensuring that that the spaces that they love still exist in 2050, that they're thriving, that they can still enjoy it the way they're enjoying now, or that the way they enjoyed it in their memories. So kind of communicating to our community that way to make sure that they're thinking long term, not just about saving money, but about investing in the things that they love, that the place they love. So yeah.
Excellent. I'll say for us in Routt County, a large part of our economy and existence is just around the natural environment. So we're about 1.5 million acres, half of that is public land, and so a fire almost invariably would take place on that public land or at least next to it. And we've got a ton of watershed. We've got rivers running into other rivers that flow ultimately down into the Colorado. So what I'll talk about is the Colorado Water Conservation Board's Wildfire Ready Watershed Program, which ultimately leads to wildfire ready action plans. There's good money out there to do these post-fire risk analysis that contemplates water and water infrastructure and what you can do before, during, and after an event to protect that infrastructure and those water resources. There's really good hazard analysis and post-fire modeling that shows where your likely debris flows would be and what the downstream impacts of those would look like after a wildfire. And ultimately, we've got 3 WRAPs, that's another acronym, Wildfire Ready Action Plan. We've got 3 in various states. We had a smaller one at the Bear River, which feeds into 2 of our drinking water reservoirs. And then slightly more recently, we had one along the Steamboat Front, which covers 5 considerable watersheds. And then there's a huge one called the Headwaters of the Colorado watershed that actually starts in Routt County and kind of goes up and follows the Little Snake River up into Wyoming. So ultimately, the Bear River was the first one, and that one has actually got boots on the ground doing projects as a result of that, and we're seeing now those debris flow analysis incorporated into hazard mitigation planning at the county level, so it all plays really nicely together. And the last thing I'll say about sort of the aftermath of an event, and I again will say I sit here with the luxury of not having had to go through and live through a catastrophic wildfire event, but if you're not contemplating the inequities that existed in your communities prior to the event and attempting to address them in your recovery planning is not just. You have to look and take an honest look at your sort of society and your social networks and look at the problems and the challenges that you face. And as Kohl said, take that opportunity to say, okay, we've got potentially some additional resources coming our way. Let's work to fix some of this other stuff while we're here.
So yeah, I definitely heard a lot of common themes with your points, like partnerships, planning, being proactive, and then being able to use the systems you built to be able to shift as needed for whatever is the challenge you're working on. So I hope you guys resonated with you. I know you have a lot of your own lessons, and we are looking forward to having conversations with you to hear best practices in your communities and the work you're doing and maybe some challenges, and we can brainstorm on what are some solutions. To close out the panel, we're going to do a quick lightning round where each panelist gives like a quick 30-second resilience hack where they look at one low-cost, high-impact action that you all can take back to your communities. So we'll start.
Well, I'll just go back to question 1. It's the ambassador program. Find your local leaders that have a little bit of free time, are respected in their communities, connect with them, get them trained up, support them, and you will have the highest impact and lowest cost resource at the fingertips.
This will come at no surprise, but connection is the biggest one. So ultimately, there's a lot of people, right? There's a lot of agencies working in similar spaces. So take this time and the time throughout the year to make sure you're meeting folks, identifying who's doing similar work, get together and collaborate. There's a lot of work to be done, obviously, so don't do it alone. And obviously that's gonna help you to fill out, your emergency operations center, your recovery coordination, whatever it is that you're doing, the more partners you have, the better that work's gonna go.
And I'm going to go along the same. So it doesn't cost anything to have a conversation with somebody who knows more than you do about the topic that you are either thinking about implementing or learning about. So particularly as a local government planner, I'm kind of a generalist. I know a little bit about a lot. I don't know very deep into very many topics. And so I can't even stress how important it is every time I'm thinking about implementing or creating a policy, I need to be talking to those of you that are the experts. And for those of you, take the time to share with us. Because building those relationships and conversation is really the key, as you all know, which is why you're all here. So.
All right, again, thank you for that summation. I think that really ties up some of the key points. I do have one final dad joke for you, okay? So what did the campers say about the campfire? They gave it glowing reviews.
Oh.
So I think we can give this panel some glowing reviews. So thank you. We are at time, and we invite you to come again talk to us if you have comments, questions. So I'll leave you with this, okay? Resilience is a muscle. You don't build it during the crisis. You build it by taking action now. So let's get to work.